I've never seen a wilderness meal look this rich and satisfying, so hearty, so full of strength. The man before us is Morgan, 33 years old, and right now he's slicing thin cuts from a huge slab of meat, laying each one over the fire, letting the smoke slowly cure it. So the salted meat can last through the icy temperatures ahead. He's at a camp near the Yukon Valley, on the edge of Alaska's deep wilderness, about to begin a life-changing journey. Morgan is originally from Idaho, but this marks his 5th year living in Alaska. Ever since he was 20, he's wandered the wilds searching for the life he dreamed of. And in the end, it was Alaska's raw frontier that finally made him want to stay. So not long ago, he bought 224 acres of land. Next, Morgan must cross the towering Alaska Range ahead, trekking over 400 kilometers of snow to reach the site where he'll build his new winter home. It's late autumn, shifting into early winter, and surely this journey will freeze him to the bone and shake his resolve. His mind spins with the cold, almost out of body. First, he sketches out the overall route. This is where he stands now, surrounded by endless mountains. To cross the Alaska Range, he must ford rivers and find a corridor through the mountain walls. And finally, walk 160 kilometers of forest before reaching the land where he'll build his snowy homestead. As for the length of the journey, Morgan estimates that in a day, he'll only move a distance roughly equal to a lighter's length. No one knows how many weeks it'll take him to arrive, yet he chooses one of the toughest routes possible, making life difficult for the poor cameraman following him. With the food smoked and ready, Morgan packs up to begin his trek. Choosing to leave in the change of seasons has pros and cons. The frozen marshes and soft grounds become solid, making travel easier, but the price is brutal cold. Considering the long trek, Morgan must control every gram of weight in his pack. His sleeping bag is essential, along with more than 10 kilos of smoked goat meat and a lightweight waterproof tarp. He also carries a trusted companion, a revolver. A model built for harsh wildlands, enough to face black bears or moose if they approach his snowy camp. Once everything is packed, the backpack swells to its limit, even though he minimized as much as he could. When it comes to gear, durability and quality usually mean more weight, so reducing load is nearly impossible for Morgan. Now, his single mission is to stay alive beneath the thin blanket of snow. He begins moving toward the first forest checkpoint. In the Susitna River woods, there are no trails, so the ease or hardship of the path depends solely on his choices. And unlike many forests, Alaska's woods are full of shrubs short but incredibly dense, making passage slow and exhausting. They immediately drag down his pace. Right from the start, his progress is already behind schedule, and as he continues moving north, it isn't long before Morgan climbs onto a small ridge. The Susitna River now lies right below him. Next, he must descend the ridge he just conquered and use the small inflatable valve in his pack to follow the river downstream. This way, he can save a huge amount of time on the journey to his snowy homestead. As soon as he reaches the riverbank, Morgan checks the water level. It's not very deep, and with a small inflatable raft like his, it shouldn't be too big of a problem. Down by the water, he pulls out the pack raft. Folded up, it weighs just over 3 kilos. Then he immediately starts a series of calm, practiced moves like he's done this 100 times before. He puts on an extra jacket, checks every piece of gear on his body maps, compass, and survival tools, all the essentials he'll need in case he ends up in the water and loses his backpack. Then he slips on his life jacket and lashes the pack securely to the raft. Only after making sure nothing is missing does he push the raft into the current. He's ready to move on. From here, he'll drift west along the Susitna River. Floating saves his strength and the pace is impressively fast, but that doesn't mean it's safe. He has to constantly watch the direction of the current and keep an eye out for sharp rocks lurking beneath the surface. It doesn't take long for Morgan to hit his first real test. The water ahead is running fast, with jagged rocks sticking up in the middle of the channel. Crashing into them is almost impossible to avoid. He just hopes none of them have razor edges. One cut in this inflatable raft and his river shortcut is over. Right as he pushes through the first narrow stretch, a canyon looms ahead. The current there is even more violent, and the rocks even thicker. Some people ride bumper cars for fun. Morgan is out here playing bumper boat on a freezing river. In just a few kilometers, his backside has slammed into submerged rocks more times than he can count until it's gone completely numb. The moment he gets through the first section of whitewater, another swirling rapid comes roaring in. After a relentless series of hits and spins, it's almost inevitable the raft finally flips. Luckily, the water here is shallow, and he manages to scramble to shore quickly. As soon as he stands up, he notices something a still pool by the bank has already frozen over with a thin sheet of ice. At the same time, he can see what the river looks like further downstream. Drawing on years of survival experience, Morgan knows that staying on the water now would be asking for trouble. So he immediately packs up the raft and switches to climbing on foot. That short canyon run on the river has carried him roughly 12 kilometers closer to his snowy home site. Now he needs to gain elevation and scout the next stage of the route. He climbs higher until he's about 1,000 meters above the valley floor. Up here, wind-blown snowdrifts start to appear, and the temperature plunges to below -20. The mountain wind slams into his face like a slap from the prettiest girl in the next class over. But once he reaches the ridge, Morgan's view explodes open. Denali, the highest peak in North America, seems to rise right in front of him. Still, this is no time to stand there and get emotional. He has to find a route that's open, safe, and possible to traverse with his load. Morgan spent 7 years saving up to buy this land. Now he finally owns a piece of Alaska to call his own. But to actually stand on that snowy ground, he still has more than 420 kilometers to go. What lies ahead? He now begins an incredibly long trek through the snowy forest. Standing before a half-frozen river, Morgan feels a moment of doubt. The Matanuska-Susitna Valley is filled with countless rivers and streams, and this awkward seasonal transition makes everything harder. Half the river is flowing water. Half is thin ice, not strong enough to hold his weight, yet the water is too cold to cross by raft without risking his life. Even worse, the river hugs a canyon wall, meaning he has no way to go around it. After a long hesitation, Morgan realizes he has no choice left. He must slowly test the ice with each step. Right now, he is quite literally walking on thin ice, and the sub-zero cold gives him zero room for mistakes. One slip could be the end. But once he observes the ice closely, he quickly forms a plan to cross the river. First, he builds a fire to stay warm. Then he cuts a sturdy birch branch about the size of a broom handle and saws it into 2 short grips. Next, he carves a groove in each, hammers a large nail halfway in, just a quarter of its length, then binds it tight with cord. Once fixed, he cuts off the nail's head and sharpens the tip to a deadly point, so if he falls through the ice, he can stab into it and climb back out. These ice claws could probably climb a tree, so a few thin ice sheets should be nothing. After extinguishing the fire, Morgan searches for thicker ice. Ideally, he won't need to use his self-rescue tools, but of course, it's best to assume the worst in the wilderness. For extra safety, he drags his pack raft out once again. His backpack weighs 30-40 kilos, placing it on the raft, spreads the load across the ice. That greatly reduces the risk of breaking through. He also doesn't want his gear soaked, so Morgan straps it down carefully. Then, with his life jacket on, he steps onto the ice. Every movement is slow and deliberate. Each step sends cracks, whispering beneath him the ice groaning, like it might split any second. His heart pounds harder each time. By the time he reaches the middle of the river, it's the classic rule of survival. If nothing goes wrong, something will go wrong. Sure enough, the ice gives way beneath him. He plunges straight into the freezing water. Thankfully, his rescue claws work perfectly. He stabs into the ice and scrambles out before the cold finishes him off. He doesn't hesitate, he sprints away from the weak ice zone. The middle of a river always freezes last, meaning he fell right where the ice was thinnest. Looking back, crawling might have been safer. But right now, the most urgent task is to build a fire before hypothermia sets in. His soaked clothes are draining heat from his body 25 times faster than normal. A few more minutes and he would collapse. And if that happens, he'll never make it home. Fortunately, once the fire roars to life, his mind and nerves begin to stabilize. He strips off all his clothes to dry them by the flames. But falling into the water means he can no longer reach his intended checkpoint today. With the day's goal ruined, he decides to rest beside the fire. Morgan checks his map again and realizes on the map he's barely moved the length of a fingertip. Today marks day 10 of his snowbound journey. A few weeks earlier, Morgan had bought himself a patch of land in the Alaskan wild. Now he has to hike more than 400 kilometers through forest just to reach it and start carving out a home. Starting from a small creek, he crossed a massive mountain range, then followed the water down into the valley, the very place where he's standing now. But in front of him lies another valley, even broader and deeper, filled with towering forests, and that's where he plans to camp tonight. Morgan has to hurry across this bare, wind-swept plateau where not a single tree grows. Everyone knows in the wild, trees are the best natural windbreaks. Out here on this exposed ground near the Arctic Circle, Morgan is completely naked to the elements. The icy wind lashes his face like knives. In daytime, it's barely tolerable, but if night falls before he reaches the trees, things could get very dangerous. He stares at the distant forest, and it almost feels like a mirage. It looks close, but he walks forever and never arrives. On top of that, he has to worry about drinking water. The darker it gets, the lower the temperature drops, and the stronger the wind grows. Everything is working against him. 2 hours later, Morgan is treated to a breathtaking sunset over the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. Golden light brushes across his thick beard like a tease. Beautiful? Absolutely. Helpful? Not at all. He still has to slog a few more kilometers before he can finally slip into the safety of the trees. By now, his backpack feels noticeably heavier on his shoulders. And there's another problem: his water supply is about to run out. Many people think in this kind of cold, you don't need to drink much water. In reality, it's the opposite. What's more, for Morgan, eating snow is not a good option either. The snow on this plateau is loose, like sand, powdery, airy, and holding almost no real water. So his only real hope is to reach that forest ahead as fast as possible, and pray he finds a stream that hasn't frozen solid. But as he keeps moving, an unexpected bit of luck appears. Morgan spots, not far ahead, what looks like a tiny trickle of water on the ground. It might be a small stream. At this point, nothing else matters. He practically tosses his notebook aside, determined to gulp down some food and water and refill every bottle he has from that creek. As soon as he scoops it up, he tilts his head back and chugs half a bottle glug, because the farther he goes, the scarcer liquid water will become. Chewing on a slice of salted dried mutton, Morgan recalculates how to ration his food and water. He needs a smart plan now. After a short rest, he feels like a truck that's just been refueled, energy surging back through his body. No matter how mesmerizing the sunset is, he has no mood left to admire it. Morgan kicks his pace up a notch, racing toward the forest for shelter. As the sky darkens, he keeps his headlamp on and trudges through the night. The plateau winds start howling even harder, and the temperature plunges to around -12. Under his light, the snow at his feet sparkles with countless icy shimmers. It looks beautiful, but clearly, Morgan's pace has slowed dramatically. He can't see far ahead now, and he has no idea how much farther the forest actually is. But after another 10 minutes, he feels himself stepping into rough shrubs. No tall trees yet, but the vegetation density is rising. Inside the brush, the challenge isn't just the wind anymore. Flexible branches snap back constantly, whipping his face and head, stinging worse than the cold. As he winces and mutters, "Ouch, ow," the cameraman beside him whispers, "We all feel the same pain. We just aren't allowed to complain. This," he adds, "is the hardest job of their lives." Soon, Morgan's exhaustion starts to overwhelm him. He's already walked nearly 20 kilometers across this plateau, and night has fallen, yet the forest is still out of reach. Looking earlier, he had stared at that blank snowy stretch ahead, and now he has to convince himself that if he stops at his lowest point, he may never find the strength to move again. Logic forces him to push just a little farther. By now, every puddle on the ground has frozen solid, but suddenly, hope flickers in his chest. A tiny sapling. "Hey, little guy. Got any bigger friends around here?" He jokes to the lone young tree poking out of the snow. It's just a fragile sprout, but it might be a sign. Maybe this is the forest's edge. A few more steps and he sees more young trees. Without a doubt, he's finally reached the forest he saw from afar. Ahead stand towering, ancient trunks, a place where he can gather the wood he needs to survive. Up in these cloud-kissed mountains, there are always dry branches perfect for fire. He lights a blaze, boils a little hot water, and sighs the whole day has drained him. He can only hope tomorrow isn't as brutal. At dawn, waking in a forest over 3,000 meters high, his campfire has long gone cold. Yesterday, he spent the whole day crossing the freezing plateau, only reaching shelter at dark. Today, a new challenge awaits. He must climb the Alaska Range, towering over 6,000 meters. It rises before him like a granite limestone wall, a colossal barrier blocking his path. Thankfully, he spots a stream spilling from above, likely the mountain's weakest point and his best route through. But choosing a path isn't enough. He must prepare for the blinding sunlight that can cause snow blindness. So he cuts his sleeping pad, removes a short strip about 30 centimeters long, cuts a narrow slit in the center, ties cords around it, creating makeshift snow goggles that narrow his field of vision and soften the glare. Once the sun climbs, the next concern is nighttime temperatures, which can plunge to -45. And up here, dry firewood is non-existent. So he gathers as much as he can before leaving his only defense against the cold, and his only way to melt snow into the precious water he needs. After tying a massive bundle of wood onto his pack, he's solved both heat and hydration for now. Now comes the real test. He follows the steep ridgeline upward, climbing hard. His breathing sounds like an old tractor from the 60s, heavy, slow, and labored. The icy wind slaps his skin, threatening frostbite at any moment. The sunlight only grows harsher, so he tests his homemade goggles, tightening the narrow slit so his eyes aren't blinded by glare. His field of vision shrinks, but at least the world is no longer a blinding sheet of white. He pulls out the folding snowshoes he's carried for weeks. Finally, they earn their keep, making each step a little lighter. Then he shoulders his pack again and keeps climbing. As the sun sinks behind the peaks, he's forced to think about where he'll sleep tonight. It's his first night at several thousand meters, only a little over 300 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. Nighttime temperatures drop to tens of degrees below zero and worse. He has no tent and no sleeping bag. His only options are a natural hollow in the slope or a snow cave he digs himself. Finding a spot deep enough, he takes off his snowshoes and starts digging. He uses the snowshoes like shovels pretty handy, though he still has to pace himself to avoid working up a sweat. After countless scoops, he finally carves out a decent snow cave, good enough to shelter him for the night. He digs just deep enough cramped, but sufficient for him to crawl in and lie down. Too much digging, and the roof might collapse, then all that effort would do more harm than good. Next, Morgan needs a fire to melt snow for water. He's parched after all that digging. Getting some fluids in before sleep is a matter of survival in this environment. Dehydrate once, and the story ends right here. More importantly, tomorrow could be even harsher than today. Once the small fire catches, Morgan boils a bit of snowmelt, then gets ready to sleep. Before crawling in, he slides his snow shovel into the cave. If a nighttime avalanche buries him, he'll at least have a fighting chance to dig himself out. In the backcountry, if your survival score's under 800, you're probably better off staying home. The next morning, waking on the frozen Alaska range, Morgan is simply grateful to still be alive. Last night he dug his own snow cave by hand to make it through. He didn't sleep well, but at least he managed a few hours. Now it's about -21 degrees. Morgan lets out a long sigh. He really doesn't want to leave this tiny pocket of warmth. Thinking about the brutal section ahead, his resolve wavers for a moment, then he forces himself to focus. Carefully, he takes out the small bundle of firewood for his fire. Up here on bare rock, there's no chance of finding more fuel. Every stick he burns is gone forever. As the flames grow, Morgan scrapes snow from the ceiling of the cave into a bowl to melt for water. Today, that little bit of water is all he'll have. While it heats, he eats the last of his dried sausage. Breakfast done, he gathers the remaining firewood enough, maybe, to last just one more night. While he waits for the snow to melt, Morgan spreads out his map and studies the next stretch. The higher he climbs, the greater the risk, especially on slopes steeper than 30 degrees, where even the slightest vibration can trigger an avalanche. And even without an avalanche, one bad slip could send him to his death. But if he can just get over this mountain, the land beyond will be forest far more forgiving than this. When the water is finally hot, Morgan pours the hot water into his bottle and quickly packs up. He's not just trying to make use of the 5 hours of daylight he has left from a distance. He can already see signs of an incoming storm. That only makes him move faster. Top priority now is to get out of this exposed area as quickly as possible. Shouldering his pack, Morgan continues his long journey home. After a long stretch of climbing, as he gains more altitude, the world around him slowly dissolves into white. Soon, everything is nothing but a vast, pale void. He has to be extremely careful, listening closely to every sound around him. Drawing on years of survival experience, he tries to sense where avalanches are most likely. He keeps to the ridgeline to reduce the risk, but that doesn't mean he's truly safe. Then, with a single step, the snow under his feet cracks and slides, triggering a small slough. A tiny avalanche in miniature, the top layer shears away from the base layer, and that kind of slide can easily grow into something bigger. There's no way Morgan can eliminate that risk entirely. The only thing he can do is move in near total silence and caution. Every step is deliberate. He doesn't have enough supplies to sit out a full blizzard, so no matter what, pushing forward is his only choice. There's simply no alternative. Not long after, he hears a sound like cracking ice in the distance. Immediately, he scans the surrounding slopes. Then he warns the two cameramen not to walk too close to him. "Stay back and film from a distance," he says calmly. "If something goes wrong, at least all three won't be buried at once." With that, he puts his head down and presses on, trying to get past the section he considers most dangerous. There are only about 2 hours of daylight left. Morgan has been alternating walking and jogging, and he's exhausted. All around him is endless white, forcing him to constantly check his compass for direction. Every few hundred meters, he has to adjust his course. Each time he checks, he finds he's drifted 15, 20 degrees, proving that in conditions like this, you can't trust your eyes at all. The farther he goes, the more the storm swallows him up, leaving him as a single black speck in a white world. Thankfully, the blizzard doesn't last forever. A blast of wind from the south tears the clouds apart, opening up a window of calm. The sky brightens, and his visibility improves dramatically. Morgan quickly closes the distance to a low summit ahead. After hours of brutal climbing, he finally sees the other side of the range. It's not the highest point in Alaska, but he's achieved this leg of his mission. If nothing unexpected happens, he should be able to descend before dark and sleep in the forest below. From here to the land he bought is still more than 110 kilometers as the crow flies. For the first time in half a month, he actually feels a flicker of hope. But being happy doesn't move his feet any faster. He still has to keep trudging on. 2 days earlier, he spent 2 nights in bone-cutting cold on the Alaska range. Now, he finally makes it back down into the forest. At this point, he has just enough food for 3 to 4 more days. But the problem is, his destination is still over 100 kilometers away. Realistically, he'll need at least a week to get there. So on the move, he has to walk and scout at the same time, always searching as he goes. He keeps scanning the area, hoping to spot something that can give him some much-needed protein, especially now when he's carrying a .357 revolver, his trusty sidearm. If a rabbit or a squirrel shows up, he can take it down in seconds. But up to this point, Morgan still hasn't seen so much as a shadow of another living thing. After thinking it over, he quickly remembers one thing. Most animals prefer to stay close to water sources. Morgan figures, if he can just find a creek and follow it downstream, eventually he has to run into something. Sooner or later, something will show itself. Sure enough, when he finds a river and carefully checks along the banks, the first thing he spots are marks left by some kind of animal. This tree chewed clean through is proof enough. Whatever lives here has definitely been coming ashore. Given Morgan's situation right now, just catching one of these would already be a blessing. A big one can weigh 80, 90 kilos, even a smaller one runs 30, 40. That's several days' worth of meat. On top of that, the hide would make excellent warm clothing. Thinking is one thing, but first, he actually has to find it. Soon enough, he finds more trees gnawed into ragged stumps. Ahead, there are footprints and wet drag marks, signs of something hauling itself ashore. Looks like setting up an ambush, here's the right call. The only pity is, most people use traps and Morgan hasn't brought any. He's also never hunted this species before, so this time he has to put all his faith in that revolver. Climbing up onto the riverbank, he quietly draws the gun and cocks it. Honestly, he's not even sure if waiting here will pay off, but when the odds are this slim, you still have to try. If you don't try, your chances are 0. Even if you do, there's no guarantee of success, but at least there's hope. 2 hours crawl by, Morgan is frozen stiff and still sees nothing. Now he starts weighing the cost of his time. Normally, in an hour, he can cover about 5 kilometers through the forest. Sitting still like this, he's not gaining anything, just bleeding body heat. After going back and forth in his head, he finally decides to move on. He shoulders his pack again and plans to follow the river downstream, walking along the ice when suddenly, everything changes. The smear of red spreading across the ice shows clearly that Morgan's shot landed, but didn't drop the animal. Wounded, it slipped back into the water to escape. Not knowing how far it's gone, Morgan hurriedly strips off layers, reaches down into the freezing water and feels nothing. Looks like it's already swum off. Unwilling to give up that easily, he keeps walking along the river, peering through the ice, searching for any sign of it. He hasn't gone far when he spots a dark shape beneath the ice. The animal is lying motionless underwater. Morgan instantly knows there are only two options. Either it's stunned, senseless, or it's dead and just hanging there in the current. But the water under the ice is moving fast. If he doesn't haul it out now, it'll be swept away. Letting a prize like this slip through his fingers would be unforgivable. He scrambles to grab a rock from the far bank, drops to his knees on the ice, and smashes it down. At last, he breaks open a hole big enough. He reaches in and feels the animal's body. The moment he heaves it out of the water, Morgan finally breathes a long sigh of relief. His arms are numb and frozen solid, but he can't hide the grin spreading across his face. Even if it isn't especially large, it's just enough to fill the food gap he was facing. With this animal, it means Morgan won't have to skimp on rations for the stretch ahead. At least for a while, he can eat properly and keep moving toward his snowy homestead. Next step, of course, is getting a fire going and cooking this prize. In the forest, another advantage is he doesn't have to worry about finding fuel. Morgan easily builds a roaring fire, then pulls out his knife and starts to break the carcass down. Compared to the dried meat he's been chewing on, fresh meat is on a whole different level. After more than 2 weeks of jerky, he's been dreaming of a proper fresh roast. As he skins the animal, Morgan carefully saves every scrap of fat. Once the hide is off, he decides he'll turn it into a warm hat someday, but for now, meat comes first. He threads a huge chunk onto a stick and holds it over the flames easily a couple of kilos. The rest he slices into smaller pieces to preserve, so he can have fresh meat every day. When the outside is charred black, Morgan leans in and takes a cautious sniff. He's never tried this animal before, but out here, there's no room for being picky, so he bites right in. When you're hungry enough, anything that fills your stomach tastes pretty good. He finds it surprisingly tasty, so he decides not to march any farther today. Better to eat his fill, rest well, and face tomorrow with strength. The toughest part of the journey seems behind him. Everything else can wait until he's warm and fed. Even though the snow under his boots grows deeper by the day, Morgan is getting closer and closer to his goal. He's now on the western side of the Alaska Range, in a forest that runs all the way to the Bering Sea. So far, he's walked a total of 434 kilometers through snow and trees. His food and water are gone. On paper, he should already be standing on his land by now, but in reality, he's still slogging through the woods. Running out of supplies isn't even the worst problem. What truly scares him is missing the Friday airdrop. If he's late, he'll have to fend entirely for himself for the next week on the ice. 2 months before he set out, Morgan hired a bush pilot to make a supply drop at the coordinates he chose. The crate includes a tent, a rifle, a wood stove, food, ammo, and all the key gear he needs to start his new life. Friday is the scheduled drop day. If the pilot doesn't see Morgan waiting at the rendezvous point, he'll abort the drop, fly off, and only come back to check again a week later. So Morgan has to reach the exact spot before Friday, no excuses. If he doesn't, he'll be on his own for food, water, and shelter in the frozen wild for an entire week. According to his plan, he should still be able to make it, but a stretch of dense forest choked with trees has slowed him down badly. As if that weren't enough, while forcing his way through, he slips and takes a fall, thankfully, into deep snow. He isn't hurt, but one of the pack straps snaps clean off. Clearly, this backpack wasn't built for a life-or-death trek. Still, bad luck or not, this is no time to sit down and complain. There are still more than 10 kilometers to go. Morgan figures sewing the strap back on will cost him precious time he doesn't have, so he decides to sling the pack however he can and just keep moving. He makes use of the one remaining shoulder strap, his belt, and pure stubbornness to lash the load to his back, determined to push on to the finish. That 40-kilo pack now feels like a boulder, but he keeps walking. You can't really call it light, but it's not unbearably heavy either. What matters now is that he keeps moving forward, but with almost all the weight hanging off one side, it's fine for a short distance over time though. Even someone as tough as Morgan starts to wear down. He's forced to set the pack down, feeling as if his neck's about to give out. His whole body feels off, tight and aching in all the wrong places. After cracking his neck a few times, he suddenly remembers something, quickly rips open the pack and digs around inside. Right, he still has that inflatable boat. Now that he's out of the forest and on open marshland, if he inflates the boat and drags it on the snow like a sled, it'll save him a lot of effort on the way to his future home site. Morgan uses a pump bag to blow the raft up in no time, then ties a rope to the bow. He loads the backpack on top and starts hauling it along. As long as he watches out for sharp sticks and rocks, this setup is far easier than carrying it. Morgan moves at what feels like 1.5 times his usual pace, closing the distance to his goal much faster. The sky clears, the wind dies, the snow stops blue above, white below. Now he has to find the survey marker for his land. Like many Alaskan homesteaders, Morgan has never actually stood on the property he bought. Using only map coordinates to get a rough sense of direction are a set of coordinates on a map and a rough idea of the valley. Surveyors usually mark property lines with bright orange flags. So now his job is to find that orange flag in this forest. After a few minutes searching the spot he suspects, he finds nothing, no flag, no stake, nothing. Pacing back and forth, Morgan starts to think he stopped at the wrong bend. There are several places here that all look frustratingly similar. He heads back to the pack and checks the map again. On the map, he spots 2 S-curves in the river. Maybe he stopped at the wrong one, the one with no marker. The stake is probably at the next bend. Without wasting time, Morgan drags the little raft onward on tired legs. He reaches the second curve in the river and still sees no stake. He starts to worry, did he walk past it without noticing? Doubling back to search again, he finally spots a flash of orange in the trees. At first, the flag was tied high up, but the small sapling it was on has fallen, dragging it close to the snow. From here to the far corner is about 400 meters. All of it belongs to Morgan now. 224 acres, roughly a square about 400 meters on a side. Not huge by Alaskan standards, but it's the snowy homestead he's dreamed of. Morgan gets ready to build a fire and spend the night here. He'll sleep well and wait for tomorrow's supply drop. The first painful stage of his journey is finally over, but the building work ahead will be even tougher. When the first rays of morning sunlight hit his face, he realizes this is the best sleep he's had in weeks. 2 months earlier, Morgan bought this 200-plus acre parcel at the mountain's foot. Today is his first morning waking up on his own land. Looking around, he sees nothing but wild mountain forest on every side. The nearest road is more than 240 kilometers away. The closest town is over 320 kilometers. All he has is a single backpack with a few basic survival tools inside. After nearly 2 months of hard marching, his food is completely gone. If he wants to safely ride out the brutal winter in this frozen wilderness, he'll have to prepare carefully. First priority, do not miss the supply drop. The airdrop crate has already been arranged in advance. The bush pilot is scheduled to fly over today. To make sure he's seen, Morgan needs to build a huge signal fire right out in the open snow. When he hears the drone of the engine, once the plane spots him, the pilot will toss fresh green branches onto the fire to make a huge column of smoke as a signal. First, Morgan straps on his metal snowshoes and stomps out a clear patch in the snow. Then, he uses his little folding saw to cut down a few dead spruce trees. To save pack weight earlier, he didn't bring an axe or any heavy tools, only this lightweight saw, which just means more elbow grease now. He cuts the branches into 1-meter lengths and stacks them into the shallow pit he's dug. Then, with a cheap gas station lighter, he easily gets the dry twigs to catch. Once the flames are going, he keeps gathering more deadwood and armfuls of green boughs to build up smoke, because he has no idea when exactly the plane will arrive. The fire has to last. After all this effort, Morgan is starving he didn't eat yesterday, and today he's worked non-stop. His body is running on fumes, but apart from tending the firewood, there's nothing else he can do. He can only stand or sit by the flames and wait. Half a day crawls by with no sign of an airplane. He can't help wondering if the pilot turned back. It's unlikely, but delays happen for all sorts of reasons. As the sky begins to darken, to make sure the pilot doesn't miss the smoke, Morgan goes to his backup plan. With nothing else brightly colored left, he spreads his red duffel bag out on the snow, the biggest, brightest thing he has. He packs snow around the edges so it won't blow away, then hurries back to the fire for warmth. Winter in Alaska is brutally cold. There are only about 2 hours of daylight left. The temperature keeps falling, and still there's no plane waiting. Like this is torture. Hungry and freezing, the misery doubles. Morgan has no way to contact the pilot. All he can do is wait and silently hope. Then, in the distance, Morgan hears a faint sound, an airplane engine. His heart leaps. He locks onto the noise. He throws all the green branches onto the flames, and in less than 10 seconds, thick smoke roars into the sky. There's no way the pilot can miss that. The plane buzzes overhead with a heavy roar, and Morgan stands by the fire, staring up in excitement. As long as the pilot isn't off course, tonight he'll finally sleep in a tent. Seeing the red bush plane approach, Morgan knows the pilot has spotted him for sure. They wave at each other from sky and snow, and the worry of the last 2 months starts to melt away. Today might be the happiest day of his life. The plane banks into position and drops a large supply crate, arcing down to land in the snow in front of Morgan. Behind it, 2 more food-filled bundles follow. Now he doesn't have to be hungry, and he has fire for warmth, no more sleeping exposed in the open. How could he not be overjoyed? Then the plane circles again and drops a 3rd bundle, then a 4th. Each package lands over 100 meters away, 4 crates in total. When the plane finally departs, Morgan calms himself and starts gathering every crate in. The first bundle is packed with jerky and dry rations. Priority number 1 is to eat his fill, then drag all the crates together. Even though his strength hasn't fully returned, he can't afford to rest yet. Before dark, Morgan pitches his tent and sets up the wood stove, creating a temporary camp where he can finally rest a little and start planning his long-term shelter in the snow. This is Morgan, 33 years old. He came into this wild forest with nothing but a pack on his back, and now he's officially switching into building mode. What his future life here will look like, no one can say yet. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes everyone excited, a brand new beginning and a completely new life in a snowy wilderness home.